Welcome to this video. So today we're speaking to keeping your own sovereign self when you're in relationship. And part of this is love addiction. And we're going to go into love addiction. We're going to understand what it is. We're going to pull it apart a little bit, and we're going to look at why is it that we lose ourselves when we're in relationships sometimes. So this was a message I received a week or two ago from a woman, I think on the east coast of the US. So give me a moment, let me read this out. About 3 years ago, I separated from my husband. It was very, very eye-opening. I had a spiritual teacher in my life at that time that really helped to keep the focus on me and what I needed to shift and change. I realized that when I get into a relationship, I make that person my source. Most of the things in my life come second, and I really struggle with focusing my energy on myself and my passion. Have any of you ever felt that, where you begin to minimize yourselves and you maximize others? Let's go further into this. I've really been working on this for about 2 years now, and my life has really shifted in a positive way, and that is awesome. I was just wondering what your experience has been with this and thoughts were about finding balance in relationships and being able to focus equal energy on oneself and the relationship. Again, thank you so much for all that you share, you are doing, and such a service to humanity. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's go into that a little bit. Let's go into this focus of energy, or having this energy and carrying this energy, where we can focus on ourselves, focus on the individual or individuals in the relationship, depending on what type of dynamic it is, and focus on the growth of the relationship itself. Because there are three entities in relationship. There are, if we're looking at a normative couple relationship, we're looking at the two individuals that make up two elements of the relationship, and then we're looking at the relationship itself as an entity. So let's look at some of the reasons as to why this may happen, why we prioritize others, why we minimize ourselves and maximize others. Let's look at love addiction as one form or one possibility of what this actually means. And love addiction, of course, is very different. It's more probably in alignment with gambling addiction as opposed to, or a neurological addiction as opposed to a substance addiction. They're very different. Not very different. They share similar characteristics, but they're defined slightly differently, okay? But let's go into love addiction. No one really knows what love addiction is per se, what type of pathology it is. Could be an impulse control disorder or even a mood disorder where we experience these high levels of elation when we're giving, and our behavior then is reinforced by our lovers or that person. By nature, of course, we're all addicted to love, meaning we yearn for it, we want it, we seek it, we have a difficult time not thinking about it. We need emotional bonds to survive. We're relational beings, just like we need food, water, oxygen. It's been demonstrated that without those emotional bonds, we develop deep pathologies and our mind begins to scatter and we don't live optimally. And so we instinctively seek connection. We seek intimacy in some way, shape or form, especially romantic connection. And there's nothing dysfunctional about wanting love. It's how we go about pursuing it. And generally how we go about pursuing it is really defined by what we experience as children during our developmental years. So love addiction is a compulsive, chronic craving and or this pursuit of romantic love in an effort to get a sense of security and worth from another person. So what we're doing is we're externalizing our value and our worthiness, and we're placing that power in the hands of someone else as opposed to being responsible for our own happiness and our own joy or our own inner state. And that's where things can get really tricky. So during infatuation, we tend to believe that we have that security in someone else, and only to be really disappointed and empty again once that intensity fades, and once that individual realizes, or we realize that individual can't serve us in that way. And so the negative consequences can be severe, and yet the love addict continues to hang on to the belief that true love will fix everything. And so the causes of love addiction may be inadequate or inconsistent nurturing during our developmental years, low self-esteem, low self-worth, Absence of a positive role model or role models for committed relationships, of course. So maybe like me, I grew up with parents that were very violent and very abusive to each other, emotionally abusive to each other. They hated on each other. They weren't present to each other. They didn't treat each other with respect. And I had many examples of this through my friends and their parents as well. And so that's an example of not having, clear, connected role models for relationship. Additionally, it could be indoctrination with cultural images of this perfect romantic love and this happily ever after ending, like the Disney movies, right? I know when I was younger, I was attached to that. I thought, well, that's how love is. And for me, it was more so because I would numb out as a child, and I would find refuge, and I would find reprieve in watching these Disney movies because of what I was experiencing in my home. And so for me, it made a lot of sense to, wow, I want this type of love. It must exist because it's in the movies, it's in the cartoons. As a kid, you don't know any different, but we form these belief systems and we take them on as if they're gospel, as if they're real. And so we take that on into our adult lives, not knowing that we have these unconscious belief systems that form a foundation for what we're doing and what we're thinking in the world and what we're being. And so I also want to provide you with some initial steps for breaking the pattern of the compulsion of love addiction, and we'll also explore some other avenues as to why we are invested so much in others and we're not really honoring ourselves in the process. So stop what you're doing, number one, and stand back to observe your own behavior. Like, we very seldom do that. Take an inventory of your dysfunctional patterns or the patterns that you're noticing in your world that aren't really serving you. In your current and your past relationships. And if you're not in a relationship now, that's fine. Just go back to your past relationships. Write these down, be honest, don't blame, don't project. They're your choices, take ownership of them. So unless you're in a committed relationship, do not engage in any potential romantic interactions for at least 6 months. And I call this like a no romance diet. That includes texting, email, online dating sites, hookups, introductions by well-meaning friends and family and so forth. Number two, as you list your inventory, look at the common themes and make these connections in the relationships. Does there appear to be a similarity between your childhood experiences and the choices you're making as an adult? If so, it's generally not an accident. What I'd also say, in addition to that, is look at the decisions that you're making, the patterns that are happening in your life whilst you're under pressure in that relationship. What are your go-to patterns of behavior? That's important too. Number three, if you're not in a relationship right now, consider getting some professional guidance and help that will help with your self-evaluation and give you a third-party perspective, but also really just to help you. Before you start your search again, in search for love, again, remember we said it's normal to want love in your life. So if you're in a relationship, of course, unless you're being abused or it's a volatile situation and your life's at risk, don't make any decisions or demands on yourself or the relationship or the other person until you've really had a deeply honest look at just who you are. That's really important as well. Number four, ask yourself how life would be if you took responsibility for your own happiness, if you internalized your happiness and your decision making, you looked at your successes and your failures, and you loved yourself the way that you wanted to be loved, and you began there. So often one of the best relationships and the most important relationships that we will have in our lives is that relationship to ourselves. And so when we learn to love ourselves in the way that we really want others to love us, we're able to demonstrate that. We know that children, for example, in fact, all of us really, we learn best by example. And so you provide that example for others in the way that you treat yourself. You give permission to others to treat you in that way. When you treat yourself in a really negative way, then guess what? Others have permission to treat you in that way as well because they think it's the norm. Make a plan, whatever that plan is, and follow through with it. That consistent action, that habitual patterning will be so powerful for you. You're going to feel loneliness, sadness, frustration, anger, despondency, disconnection at times, but you have the most valuable gift of all, and you'll know and you'll learn how to love yourself. And only then can you really choose authentic love, real love that can see you and meet you where you are. And it may be an imperfect relationship, and that's okay. And as an act of love that will honestly last a lifetime, accept yourself. Radical self-acceptance and self-compassion is everything. And it doesn't have to come, all wrapped up, packaged nicely. It just needs to be real. It just needs to be genuine. And so that's something that you can do if you feel maybe you're tinkering on this love addiction or love compulsion. Look into that. We spoke about self-worth and self-esteem, and let's look at that for a moment. Again, that could be one of the reasons why you're prioritizing others and not really looking after yourself, is because you've had this previous conditioning in childhood where you've been taught that your needs aren't important enough. And so you must prioritize the needs of others, and you develop this pattern. That was one of my patterns as well. I had an emotional enmeshment with my mother, and so I was emotionally projected upon as I was a partner in that relationship. And so it was consistently about, how can I serve my father, how can I serve my mother, how can I serve my brother, how can I be this people pleaser, and how can I essentially help others and completely disregard my needs. And so really look at that as well, and how you have developed this self-worth issue that no longer actually serves you. It also could be that you're engaged in this obsessive codependent type of love where your impulse for reward and your attachment are both super high. So the way that you attach and your impulse for needing reward from others, like this reaffirmation, this confirmation that you're good enough, that you're smart enough, that you're enough, that you're doing enough in the relationship. And again, this is conditioned through our developmental years, perhaps where your needs weren't met in the way that you needed them to be met. And you behaved a particular way, you screamed, you shouted, you did what you had to do to get what you needed. And that's really important to understand as well, that so much of who we are comes from who we've been. And we needn't live that way, but we often choose to live that way. And lastly, but finding balance essentially comes from creating space in our relationships from each other, having your own interests, getting clear on what's important to you, getting clear on your values, having your own hobbies, having your own lives, your own friends. It doesn't mean you don't have mutual friends, you don't do things together. You should really have time and space where you're creating together in the world and you're also creating separately. And I think that's really important because it allows you to ground in your own sovereignty and know yourself and appreciate who you truly are. So you share each other's lives, but you also share lives outside of each other as well. If you're stuck in this pattern of minimizing yourself and maximizing others, the use of self-help groups is a powerful psychosocial and common intervention. And it could be, like Love Addicts Anonymous as an example. It could be a men's help group. It even could be, without having a very deliberate intention, it could even be an athletic club. Psychodrama group therapy as well has been found to be effective in encouraging healthy relationships. And essentially that's where different people in the group will represent and symbolize different roles within your life. And it's played out in this psychodrama, essentially this play of sorts. And you get to tap into childhood aspects of yourself and get to see yourself and know yourself and learn about who you are in a very different way. So there's that there as well. There are other forms of therapy that may be helpful in treating psychological love, for lack of a better term, disorders, like cognitive behavioral therapy, through the challenging of our distorted thoughts and views about love and relationships and so forth. Psychodynamic therapy, by addressing attachment difficulties and issues, can all really, really help in terms of learning how to be more balanced in relationship. So I hope that has helped a little bit, at least has got you started to give you some inspiration, really look at yourself and look at your life and look at where you are. And so many blessings to you beautiful people. Thank you so much for being here. Rob, I love you. Thank you for watching. Many, many blessings.